All right. Hello and welcome to this week's Eros Revolution podcast. I am your host today, Maya Gilbert, and joining me is Caroline Griggs, Dr. Caroline Griggs. And today we're going to be talking about Eros and health, using a bunch of different media pieces and various different articles and statistics and studies that we have been looking at over the last week that we thought were really interesting topics to really go through with everyone and bring up this kind of conversation that seems really important in this time. So to start, we are going to start with an unlikely source maybe that you might find on the Eros platform, but it is from Tucker Carlson this week, who very interestingly had a segment on SSRIs and sexual health. So sit back and enjoy this clip.
PSSD?
Yeah, so this is...
What does that stand for?
It stands for post-SSRI sexual dysfunction. And from my perspective, this is the biggest scandal in psychiatry going on at the moment that has been not discussed. Now, there are people who get put on these medications that, firstly, one of the big side effects of these medications is sexual dysfunction. It happens in, I think it's like 70% of people who
70%?
Yeah. Yeah. So,
and when you say sexual dysfunction, since you're a doctor, we can just be totally blunt. What are you specifically talking about?
Yeah. So it would be like loss of interest in sex, loss of arousal, difficulty to reach climax, and erectile dysfunction.
Wow.
Yeah.
70%?
70%. It's a really normal side effect. But the issue is we tell people that this goes away when they come off the medications. And this is just a temporary trade-off, to feel less depressed. You're going to deal with the sexual dysfunction. But what we've been seeing is that these drugs are causing permanent sexual dysfunction in people, even when they come off of them. They develop, on top of all of those things I mentioned, they will develop genital anesthesia. And so this is a real neurological issue. Those areas down there, they lose erogenous sensation. People will say that when they touch down there, it feels like the back of their hand or the back of their arm. And so there's sensory changes.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And so it's totally frightening.
For how long?
It can be permanent for some people.
Come on.
Yeah. And so the prognosis is actually really, it's not good for that. Some people will recover in, 3 years or so, but there are case reports out there where this has gone on for decades. But
what?
But it's not just that. And here is
basically you're castrating people.
You're essentially castrating people, but it's worse than that. Because
how could anything be worse than that?
Because along with the sexual dysfunction, and this is where the condition is misunderstood. People think it's just a sexual problem, which is already horrific as is. It causes cognitive damage as well. People will along with that, they'll have severe difficulty concentrating, focusing, paying attention. And there's also severe emotional blunting. And so people will talk about being completely dissociated as well from their emotions. Like if you were to hug a child, your child or your wife, you just don't feel anything warm. If you were to hear a favorite song from your childhood that, used to make like the back of your neck kind of prickle from nostalgia, all of that gets nuked and taken out. And so you have people who are essentially lobotomized with cognitive impairment who also have severe sexual dysfunction.
So you're basically destroying someone's soul. I mean, the things that make you distinctly human.
Yeah.
Your love, your emotional response, your sexual response, which is very deep. It's not just I'm horny today. It's it's your life force. It's your procreative force. It's what keeps the species alive. Yeah. That's gone.
It's wiped out, and people become highly suicidal because when you don't.
So first off, just giving it up to Tucker Carlson for just bringing this conversation into a very public arena, and then to be able to have that level of a dialogue, not just talking about sexuality as additive to people's life, as a bonus, as just like an enjoyment level thing. But actually, this is something, I mean, he called it like the soul, he called it the life force of the planet. And to have that conversation, I think it shocked me, frankly, when I saw it, that he was the one who's bringing this conversation in. And on top of that, I've been thinking a lot about this topic in general. And so I wanted to bring Caroline Griggs on because she has a medical history, and I thought that she would just bring such a depth to this conversation. And so with that, I'd love to hear some of your initial thoughts after seeing that, what you're thinking, your thoughts at large. Bring us into the conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my first favorite moment that they have is that when he's like, wow, 70% of people experience this. And as like having a pharmacist background, it's just like, it's kind of the place where we learn all about side effects, but then you just kind of, no one talks about it. And so that was really fun. And then the like root of so as a pharmacist, you learn a lot about emotional blunting, but not a lot about the sexual dysfunction that comes with SSRIs. And it kind of highlights, even in the healthcare world, its sexuality is kind of well, it's a moneymaker, but it's not like a place that people value of that. And I just love at the end where he's like, where he says, oh, wow, it is your life force, and feeling that in other people. And I think, I'm not sure, like kind of the thing that kind of stands out to me is like, okay, well, it's such an interesting time to have that be a conversation for someone, like, oh, why now? SSRIs have been around for 20 plus years. And so people could have talked about it 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, but it's like right now, what is having people like talk out more about sexuality and really think a lot more about like, oh, I actually want to have access to my sex drive and have that part of myself expressed. So as a Eros practitioner, I think that's kind of what excites me. And it's kind of like, oh, wow, it's really ripe for, the world is becoming ripe for what Eros offers.
Yeah. I think that a big influence has been, there's been just a ton of different things. The MAHA movement, for those of you who don't know what MAHA is, it's Make America Healthy Again. It's like MAGA, and then they went to the health side, and RFK heads it up. And I think that a lot of, that's kind of like the branding and flagship of it. But I do think that a lot of the things that foundationally created that is having a resurgence in culture right now, from everything from people who are doing more homesteading, that you see that tons more online, and people who are overall just talking about all of these different health things that have been around forever, but there's a new resurgence of it. Just like, maybe 10 years ago, there was a resurgence of like at-home brewery and people who are like learning about macro gastronomy and all of those things. But now there's this whole new investigation into health, and what is health? How do we revisit our entirety of health? But an interesting thing, that the reason that this struck my attention so much is because inside of that whole conversation, sexual health still isn't a part of the conversation at large. People are focused kind of first on food, probably exercise and sleep and these different kinds of things, lifestyle just in general, but not into the realm of what I really believe the frontier is, which is going to be sexuality. Just like psychedelics are almost like kind of at the conversation's a little bit over in terms of people now, that's a given that psychedelics help people in a lot of different new forms of healing modalities. But we still are so just at the bleeding edge of understanding the implications of what this life force actually means for us. Why do we call it a life force and then not treat it as such? And so with that, I think it would be really cool to hear you talk about the science that we've done and what that's shown.
Yeah. So The piece that, so we did a study looking at couples. They had EEGs connected to their head, but this piece isn't about that. They also answered questionnaires about how they felt before and after. And I loved this study when I first found out about it, because people had increased rate of happiness and a decreased rate of anger and anxiety, which in the pharmacy world and the healthcare world is unheard of. It's just like absolutely unheard of that you can manipulate positive and negative emotions in the direction you want them to go. And so that is what he is talking about with emotional blunting.
One moment, they just froze. They'll be back online.
Okay, are we back?
We're back. Can you see us?
Can't see you, but can hear you.
You can.
There you are.
Yeah,
There we are. I got really excited and really let you guys feel how excited I get.
Here, you could just start back over
Okay.
from the top of the study and say that it was an ohm study.
Yeah, so okay, so there's a study of orgasmic meditation with couples. A part of the study was that each person in the orgasmic meditation pair wore EEG, but this specific results is not about the EEG. It's about some surveys they took where they talked about how they felt before the ohm and then how they felt after the ohm. And what we found was that post ohm, people had an increased experience of happiness, joy, fulfillment, and a decreased experience of anger and anxiety, which as a pharmacist and healthcare practitioner, this just blew my mind, because it's simply unheard of. Like, you cannot, nowhere in healthcare can you manipulate both in the direction that you want them to go. You can either increase happiness, but then the other one is flat, or things like that. And so that's what he's talking about with emotional blunting, is that when you take an SSRI, you no longer have these deep depressions that put you at risk for suicide, but you can't feel happiness. You cannot feel joy. And so to be able to do that through orgasmic meditation is just is a gift, and it goes against everything. And so what that really speaks to is that the use of sexual energy moves our emotions it moves our emotions in the direction we want them to go. So if you increase access to sexuality, emotions that arise when you do the practice of Om, what it's saying is that aspect of yourself will self-regulate for you where the direction you want those two things to go. And so it's a great study that highlights the importance of sexuality, the importance of taking 15 minutes a day to look at that. And that's one ohm in the whole study. That's one ohm that they do. And it just shows inside of that really the power of the body. And this is for both men and women that had this experience of the increase in happiness and joy and decrease in anger and anxiety.
It's so interesting. And I guess I just want to hear you talk more about this, because I think that it's just so, on the one hand, I think it is so natural for people. And I think people instinctively know they are happier when they are connected to some part of their erotic self. I think everyone has that experience of when you fall in love, when you have a really intimate experience that's very positive, and the way that it just colors everything in your life, and where everything suddenly is more optimistic or more playful, or just a deeper sense of fulfillment. And the impact on that on health and on the healthcare industry at large. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think a really funny way to tie in my interest is kind of tell the story of how I kind of came to find Ohm. So I was working in a pharmacy. I was working in a retail pharmacy, which was Walgreens. And in that kind of environment, you guys have all been to a pharmacy where people kind of come, they want their drug, and I'd say 90% of the time it's not ready or not the quite right price. And so it kind of creates like an irritation when you go there, like no one really wants to stand in line. And so I'm working behind the scenes, and I was kind of like, what do I want to get out of this? Like, it's not, I was kind of the mindset that, how, I'm doing this thing. How do I make it enjoyable for myself? And so I started this little game where normally pharmacists do not talk to the customers, but I kind of went around this and I started checking out the customers, and I made this game where I was like, oh, can I take someone's irritation and have them leaving joyful? And I played this game, I'd say like 6 months. And by the end of it, I concluded, I was like, oh, the world doesn't need more prescriptions. The world doesn't need drugs. The world just needs love. And that's like kind of what sent me on this journey of finding orgasmic meditation. I like started with myself, and then, met someone who told me about it, and then really got to have the whole experience of, like I'm a personal story of someone who was on antidepressants, started oming, no longer had to take antidepressants. So, yeah, I think just in that piece, I'm probably one of the biggest advocates of how orgasmic meditation could shift our whole healthcare. And I think the reason why is because it innately in its structure, which those of you who are familiar with Om had set up to do 15 minutes, you have a container, you do the same structure over and over, and then you have an experience inside of it based on that day and what happens. And sometimes it's the result isn't always guaranteed like bliss, if that makes sense. And so I think what it does inside of that is like teaches you how to experience your own internal world, and gives you skills that allow you to interact with things that happen in life. And I think that's the primary cause of a lot of disease states, is just like it's almost like a lack of skill. And to kind of give it more ground and speak from reality. So like I suffered from depression. My primary reason I suffered from depression was because I was a very emotional person. Being an emotional person in the world is unique. And so, I was taught button those down, keep them contained. And then turns out putting attention 15 minutes a day on my clitoris, it was just what I needed to like learn how to interact with those parts of myself, and would leave joyful. And so it was like giving myself a nutrient, and then also just like teaching myself how to be with my own emotions, so then I could teach others how to be with me. And so that's a life skill. And then when I didn't have that, the emotions collapse in on you, and creates this feeling of depression, is my personal opinion. And so I think when you think about there's a lot of mental health things, but I guess inside of it, like for PTSD, we did a study for PTSD. It showed that orgasmic meditation was safe for people with PTSD, and then it also showed an improvement. But the coolest thing that we learned inside of that is that people who, this is not in the paper, but specifically I'm like translating results, but basically people with PTSD actually have this inherent resilience that they don't even know they have, like a natural capacity to access what's called a state of flourishing, which they don't even know they have access to because they're so busy identifying with their trauma, and you put them in an ohm container and then they're like, wow, I like really can handle, high emotions with my partner and I didn't even realize it, and now we're more connected. And so they, this thing that they think was so wrong actually was like a crutch experience in their life that now gives them greater capacity to handle all of life, and which in essence leads to more flourishing. Flourishing is basically the ability to find fulfillment in all locations. And so if you have overcome this very challenging situation, then all the other areas become more easeful to deal with if you can work through that piece. And so I loved learning that about watching them go through and just kind of seeing it. And then also, the results show that, they just have this natural capacity for flourishing, which really surprised us. You think that's not the case, but that was really fun to learn that. And so I think Ohm and Eros is the secret access point to find the gifts in all mental illness versus the crutch or Achilles heel of it.
That's such a beautiful way of putting all of that, and it, I think, goes really well into our next clip that we're going to be playing, which is by one of my favorite people who is on social media right now. I love all of her content. I highly recommend her. And if we can share her clip now on identities.
So mental health awareness is it's at an all-time high, and that is great. But some of these trends, they are making people worse, not better. Let's talk about it because I got three that's top of mind. The first one is turning labels into identity. Labels were meant to be for understanding, not a personality, but today people are branding themselves with their diagnosis. And even when you think about like, I have ADHD, so I can't focus. I have an anxious attachment, so I can't trust people. Instead of working through things, people are actually using the labels to justify staying the same. And in some cases, like using it to weaponize like some of their relationships.
Beautiful. So this woman, first of all, you will put her in the chat. You need to go listen to everything that she says because really she is on point with almost everything that she posts in a way that I think is so refreshing these days, to just have these conversations where so much of mental health right now, so much of how we talk about it in a cultural sense is from a perspective of one identifying with problem. Oops.
That was me.
One identifying with problems and then creating it as a culture instead of it being something that is helpful in actually working through it and then creating flourishing through it. And so with that, I wanted to get your perspective on that idea of identities that one takes on for these diagnoses and how Eros relates to that.
I kind of had like a really controversial thought come through as this was played. So we'll see,
But really in.
Yeah, it's not that controversial. But basically I was thinking, I was like, oh, like, where does this come from? And like, I was having a conversation, with you the other day about someone labeled your little brother ADHD. And we were kind of talking like, well, that label doesn't really help. It can help you like help him through, but really it's just like not embracing his brilliance and all of those things. And I was like, oh, the labels are a place that we have come as, you know, as parents, as people who bring children through, you label it, so then you have this reason to not deal with it and like really lean out, and then the child takes that on as an adult, and they're like, well, this is the thing that's wrong with me or that I'm diagnosed with. So then you kind of walk around it, you know. And so I was like, felt this like, because the cool thing about that woman that's talking is the thing that I found about her is her baseline note is like, we all need to be adults. We're all responsible for our lives, and we're all responsible for our growth. And then to do that, you have to engage with your life. And when she's talking about that, I'm like, oh, that is just really pointing to a place where, as like a people, we have this tendency to label, to be lazy, and then ask for a quick fix, which is what leads to SSR, you know, the whole SSRI thing and all the medications. Is just like people don't want to work at things. They don't want to feel this uncomfortable. They don't want to find a resourceful solution. And, you know, that to me kind of like brought up a sadness and like, wow, there's really a disability like of the world that is kind of enabling the whole environment of that. And it requires, you know, a deeper rewiring in people.
Yeah. Yeah. I know as you were talking, I was thinking like, you know, so what does it take to have someone feel confident enough to address the whole of their health by facing their sexuality, and what that takes in most people to get to that point. You know, I have been teaching orgasmic meditation now for about 16 years, and I can tell you that for the most part, people who arrive to learn orgasmic meditation have really tried kind of it all. And they're like, okay, I did the regular sitting meditation. I went to therapy. I did everything that I possibly could. And most of it, it all, you know, I would say everything helps. There's no point of self introspection and going about your healing journey that is wrong. But by the time someone makes it to, oh God, okay, let me look at my sexuality and see if maybe that will help me, it really is usually the last stop in the train for most people, because they could do it easier, you know, if you can just take a pill, if you can just do something easy, even complicated, they'll do that before they go and address their sexuality as a means of true healing. But then on the flip side, I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who have had this experience of tremendous, deep, and often even quick healing and kind of restored to a level of health and vitality that they didn't know or remember was even possible for themselves once they started practicing orgasmic meditation. Everything from food intolerances to mood disorders to physical illness, you know, being able to be restored. And I think that, you know, we had this experience for so many years of just witnessing this happen until the science started to get done on it. And now we've had how many studies?
We have 11 papers and 9 studies.
So 11 papers and 9 studies have been done on orgasmic meditation, and it's so controversial. I mean, just talk a little bit about just what it's like to do science on orgasmic meditation in America.
This is the time of my life. It's literally, you know, thank God I have a pharmacy degree so I can do home science. Who would have thought? Well, I think talking about what's it like doing, I mean, it's hard to answer it because I feel like you want me to say it's controversial, but we have built such a beautiful team of really respected doctors and researchers that love Ohm. So I feel actually like quite buffered inside of it. But and like actually people love learning about it. I think, yeah, so I can't quite in this moment give you the expected answer, but like that's, it's, I mean, people are really hungry for it right now. So I think in a way it's kind of, I'll tell you, publishing the papers has kind of been our bane right now, is just because it's like that paper that's publishing has to be like, okay, do we want to publish about sexuality? Um, and so that's been can be a little bit more challenging aspect of where we are in our current research, because we have some really beautiful papers that tell quite a bit. And publishing a paper in science is always challenging, but when you add in orgasmic meditation and sexuality, it's like, do they want to offer that side in their journal? And so, but then again, we have 11 published, so it's like quite refreshing how people are interested in that. And then also we do research in PTSD. And I'll tell you about this mystical experience study because I think it ties in really nicely. But like, which mystical experience then helps with depression. And so people are publishing them because if the world is so hungry for options other than SSRIs and because they all know it doesn't work. I mean, people are out there prescribing it and they're like, we know this doesn't actually work. So that's kind of funny part. But I was going to tell you like this, when she was talking about how quickly the change happens, I was like, oh, that is because in orgasmic meditation, you access a mystical experience. And that is the same results that psychedelics find. So you can be on SSRIs for a year, 2 years, and you like feel like 5% better. You go do 1 dose of psilocybin and they're like 6 months later, you say you're cured of depression. And the theory is that the reason that happens is because psychedelics elicit a mystical experience, and that's what allows the rewiring, and then you can get out. And so when you were talking, I was like, oh, that is the rate at which we watch these people go through and find healing just from personal experience is like, oh, that's the piece that they're accessing mystical experiences. And I recently presented in Barcelona, and so people come from all over the world and they're reading our study we did where people wrote their own journals and we compared them to Nicole Daydon's journals. And Tibetan guy comes and he's like, wow, it took me 20 years to access this, and you guys these people did it in 1 year, and then the women come over and you can feel them be like, oh, I want this. And the thing that they say is, and this kind of touches on like why I think it takes people so long to get there, is they just were like, but how would I tell my family about that? Like, how would I be like, yeah, I decided to start this clitoral stroking practice. And I think, it is going to be the last thing that we turn to until the narrative of sexuality is shifted and in the world, unfortunately. And so that's kind of because, it's funny saying that. I'm like, wow, we as people like just love to save face. And it's like, unfortunately, any voice around sexuality, whatever form it's coming in, is just a really easy place to be targeted and attacked. And, people do everything in their power to diminish being criticized and ridiculed. And so I think that's like an unfortunate part. And so it's like until Maha changes the whole topic on everything, then we're ready for you, Maha.
I know, I was thinking that I was like, I really think that where we're at right now is like people would rather do like brain stimulation, like electrodes to your brain to stimulate and shock you than to do something that is a sexual wellness 15-minute practice.
I know. I mean, I was very fortunate. I grew up in a very pro-sexuality family, so I don't quite understand what people go through, but I really think it really is. And I think people are opening more and more to it. Like, the cool thing about politics and everything is that it's kind of like, this is maybe a weird topic, but it's like politicians get so ridiculed for their sexual, but at least it's bringing the fact that everyone is engaging in sexual nature with each other. And so it kind of like is like lightening things a little bit in some aspects of like, wow, people do have sex, and it's like, and sexuality does exist. And, it has, I think it motivates people to want to be like, why does this, have to be so dramatic, and instead it's like, if we could just make that not, it would just ease a lot of things, and people wouldn't have to hide so much, and people wouldn't have to, feel shame around that. And then who knows what we would have access to.
Yeah. I think that so as we were researching for today's episode, I went to trusty ChatGPT, and so because I wanted to understand what, like, kind of, if you just ask it, where are we at on the scale, and specifically with prescriptions and who are prescribed more, men or women. And so this was what it gave us in the key findings. And it said, one was that women are tremendously more prescribed and take medication than men. 21.2% of women reported taking prescription medication for mental health in the past 12 months, compared to 11.5% of men. Additionally, 25.6% of women received some form of mental health treatment versus 14.6% of men. And I think that just in general, I mean, these numbers, 113% more on depression meds and 103% more on anxiety meds. And there's other statistics too. You can stop sharing the screen now, but there's other things too, like women are more have higher rates of anxiety and depression and PTSD than war veterans right now. And you look at the culture and you're like, what is that? What is that women are reporting higher than a war veteran, a higher rate of PTSD, And I think in our perspective on an erotic front, the idea of that is that all of this is very symptomatic of what a culture looks like with a lack of eros. And so when you have women who herself is not accessing her direct sexual expression and power, then the direct next step is a whole series of different neuroses that she will develop within herself in the management of that. This is deeply talked about in the Erotic View of Trauma book that is on our website, which highly recommend. I helped work on that. Both of us helped work on that book. It's and it kind of explores this. It's not a lengthy book. It's free. I recommend everyone to take a look at it. But it really talks about that breakdown of a culture where you go from, what happens when you cut someone off from arousal. And so especially women, when you cut women off from arousal, then what happens? It's like if you give a mouse a cookie, but if you cut a woman off from arousal, and then the whole chain reaction that happens from that, and rather than and then you just end up in this culture of all of this neurosis, all of this over medication and dependence, and then from that a lot of discord between men and women, and then a kind of blame and just a deep aggravation that I feel like it exists right now between men and women, a deep separation. And if you just track it back to the root, it is this fundamental way that women separate from their own erotic source and their own erotic power and arousal. And when you begin to directly connect back with that and touch that, you begin to have all things resolve for herself, for her immediate environment, and then more and more at large for the entire culture.
Thoughts, yeah. Okay. I had the funniest thought when we were comparing men versus women in the stat. And I was like, oh, it's because women are so quick to be like, something's wrong with me. Something is wrong with me. Someone fix it. Someone outside of myself fix it. Something's wrong with me. It's like the first thing I thought. And I was like, oh, that's one, we don't actually know. But it's like very known in healthcare that men like don't admit that something's wrong. And so it was like, oh, that's really funny to see. And then it's like, wow, like the next step is just like you go to your doctor and you're like, something's wrong. And it's like, I mean, imagine if one of the questions was just like, how's your sex? Like if we like say in a world that we made up that Eros is like really well known and becomes this like source of like, wow, these women really understand sexuality. And it's like, I asked because these women, sexuality actually is healing. And like it becomes this meme. And so then it's like, wow, that step you could skip right there if it was just like, how's this, And so that was like a really cool thing that I felt.
Before I found Ohm, I went to a gynecologist. And because I was like, I'm not climaxing the way that I see in movies. And so I went to a gynecologist and I said, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Literally. I went and I had her get to it. And she was like so great and funny. And she was like, honey, you got a textbook vagina. And I was like, great, thank you. Thank you so much. But I had that feeling. I was like, there must be something wrong with my body. It doesn't work the way that I think it's supposed to work, but there was nothing actually wrong. I just, when I first found orgasmic meditation, that was the big realization was, oh, nothing's wrong. We just literally, I grew up in New York, okay? I grew up in New York, Brooklyn, with artist parents, and the fact that I didn't know, I was just so clear. If I didn't know, just no, like none of us know anything. I just realized, okay, yeah, we're given health class, we're given, everything that we can learn on the internet, but there's that kind of depth of understanding and that depth of actually understanding this is how arousal works, this is how the body works, and this is how you get into a state of arousal is not something that we have access to as a cultural conversation. And that is why we are here to be having these Eros Revolution conversations.
Yeah. I want to share. I love this. I know it's not like really a science podcast, but I do hold all the science. So, but anyway, talking about arousal and just like women thinking something's wrong. So we in the same study that I talked about earlier, where it was increase in happiness and decrease in, they also asked about they asked who had a childhood trauma and then measured their level of arousal. And what they found, now this study is done by a woman who is an expert in studying sex. Like she knows sex in and out. And her name is Nicole Browsey. And so she does this study and she finds out that the people who had a history of sexual trauma get more aroused. And in doing this, like she's like, whoa, this changes.
Tell them why though. People don't know why.
I know, but it's just like I just like the feeling of a woman who's like researching sex, just being like, oh my God, this changes everything about everything.
And why does it change everything?
Because in the research world, in the medical world, there is this theory that people who have sexual trauma can no longer get aroused. Like that you have sexual trauma and arousal is just no longer available for you. And it's well known. It's just like a thing that happens and they share and they're like, you just probably will never access this unless, you know, you work through it or things like that. And so,
Or you take the new pink pill.
yeah, the new pink pill, which I'm not even familiar with because I don't even keep up on that. But yeah, so then in the study, Nikki kind of looks at it and she's like, why is this? Why are they experiencing more arousal? And what she says is that the ohm container creates a level of safety for people who have experienced trauma to actually access their arousal. And then they have more, which just kind of goes back to my PTSD thing where people who have PTSD actually have this superpower. And it's like people who have sexual trauma actually have a superpower that they can get more aroused. Like it's just ohm science plus ohming just like opens the world to all of these things that we would never think of. And so when you were talking, I was just like, wow. And it's just like everything we're talking about, like if you identify with your sexual trauma, then you can never experience arousal because you believe this. And it's like goes back to that identity thing that we were talking about. And so you know, Eros, Ohm, life force, it just has this capacity to like flip the head of everything that, you know, we believe. And yeah, it's just kind of a really it's just interesting to sit here with you and talk about it and be like, wow, we have so much, you know, and then think about, wow, then just like the answer is here. And you know,
We have a long road ahead of us.
hopefully not that long.
Yeah,
Maybe we'll
I
make
love
it
that
go
too.
fast.
So we'll just end with the final Instagram, which this is the corollary side. So if on one side we have women are deeply more diagnosed and given more medication, on the other hand, we have this male loneliness epidemic, which you know, is this thing that all over social media, talked about a lot in culture right now. But you have this also, like the common response to anyone bringing up this concept of a male loneliness epidemic is this exemplified in this here Instagram by Boss Women Magic, where male loneliness epidemic is crossed out and it's described as the male entitlement epidemic, the male loser epidemic, incels not worth reproducing with epidemic. Okay, you can take this down. And so this is a part of the division that I was talking about before, which is women in the culture, when we have not upheld the mantle of sexual power and our own arousal, then when we are in the face of, say, an entire culture of men that say there's a loneliness epidemic, that the response would be just deeper judgment and deeper sense of withholding, instead of what is our natural gift and the thing that we could offer of if we are connected to arousal, then I think every woman has had that experience when you are deeply fulfilled, deeply satiated, and deeply nourished within oneself. Everyone benefits from that. And it's a hard road to walk. There's a lot of things that you might come up against, of judgment and all of these different things, but when you separate yourself from it, then the best thing that you have is basically doing back to a masculine what you are criticizing the masculine doing, which is being dry and withholding and judgmental. Then you become that. And I see, you know, this is on every level of our culture, from the left and the right. If the left is the more feminine political party and the right is the more masculine party, the left has withdrawn itself from providing the inspiration and the erotic insight into what the answer could be to all of our social issues, and instead doesn't do that and instead is just trying to copy and imitate the, antics or behavior of the right and just go into a making fun of or something like that, and it won't stand up and truly create its own side. And so you have that for right, left, and right. You have that for women and men, and where women will be critical. And again, it's not that this isn't to blame anyone, and this isn't to put anything as inherently good, wrong, right, bad type thing. It's just what is effective. What is effective for our health, for our flourishing, and for our society. And what is effective is women being connected to their arousal then creates a society that is a flourished one. Thoughts?
Yeah, you want to hear something so fun? I feel so turned on in this moment because I actually have science to support this, which is so wild to me.
Sure.
Like science to support left, right, all what women there. So when in orgasmic meditation, the woman lays down, she opens her legs, which puts you in a complete state of vulnerability. And then he strokes the clitoris, and you have access innately to her sexual power, which is like what we're talking about. Like, oh, if women could just open that. So there's a study that Dr. Andrew Newberg did where he looked at the brains. And if you look at the brain at men, there is a part of the brain that it doesn't say this in the paper, but because I've done like readings around it, it's basically like it creates a lot of ego, which a lot of women call narcissism. Okay. And so it's like, so in that part of the brain in men, when you stroke clitoris, it relaxes. It literally reduces the part of their brain that is connected to the ego. And then inside of that, it creates access to this place where, for the men, this is only talking about the men, where they can hear the woman and feel the woman and like learn like how to give attention while feeling what she wants. Like the brain is more greatly available to do that. And so it's like literally just by doing the practice of orgasmic meditation, you would be training your partner out of whatever that post was, which is wild to me. Like literally you could just do the practice of It's like not that hard. It's like literally like just do That's our new slogan.
Just All right. That is our podcast for today. That is Eros Revolution. We are here and join us again later on this week for our next episode. Until then,